Water is how climate change is manifested. About 70% of climate change's effects happen through water. It's important to decarbonize water because about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the human management of water or from aquatic ecosystems. It's really water as an input into everything else that we do. In fact, a recent study was shown from Global Water Intelligence that the value of water to the economy and to the water security is worth about $4 trillion today and is likely to triple in the next 10 years. So the intensity and concern and risk of water in the operations of every industry is crucial. And that's what makes now the right time to be investing in both mitigating and adapting to climate change through water.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Climb by VSC. My name is Jay Kapoor. I'm co-host of Climb and general partner of VSC Ventures. Every week on this show, I speak with founders, investors, and industry experts who are building and scaling the next generation of category-defining companies. So let's talk about what we're going to discuss today. Water. It's the number one most consumed resource on this planet, this beautiful blue marble. And yet, how often do you actually think about where your water comes from, how it's used, more importantly, what it's costing us? So today, I am so thrilled to help us and help me understand exactly that. My guest is Peter Yolles, who is spent 30 years of his career in water and is now founder and managing partner of Echo River Capital. Peter, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
It's great to be here with you, Jay.
Yeah. Well, so much for us to dig into. You have these 3 Ds of the water cycle: digitize, decarbonize, decentralize. And we did a mailbag episode probably about 20 episodes ago, and water was the number one topic that came up. And so I'm just so excited to dig into all of this with you. Maybe let's start with this idea of a fund built around water. Why was now the right moment for this, and what was the market opportunity that you saw in water to go build a fund?
Sure, yeah. So Echo River Capital is an early stage venture fund in water technology. Another way to look at it is climate tech with a water lens. So for me, it's always the right time to invest in water. As I've been in the industry and the water economy for 30 years, it's always been an important element, a foundational element for global economy. It's the right time for me personally because I exited my last company, WaterSmart Software, in 2020, and I turned my attention to advising and investing in early stage founders and their companies. So it's the right time for me. And I think that climate change has really captured people's attention. People really want to get involved and engaged in solving climate change today. And water is how climate change is manifested. About 70% of climate change's effects happen through water, through more frequent and deeper droughts, through deluges of rainfall and sea level rise. So the way climate change is experienced by people is actually through water. And that is what makes now the right time to be investing in both mitigating and adapting to climate change through water.
Yeah. Well, before we dive into those 3 Ds, the digitize, decarbonize, and decentralize, let's help our listeners understand the water value chain, so to speak, right? So taking it from source on one end and the many different sources we have for water to consumption and consumers, and whether that's the water we're drinking here or the water and how it gets used in industry. So maybe if you can help us understand that value chain and who some of the players are, that'll be a great foundation for us to go forward from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, every day we wake up and we drink a glass of water and we brush our teeth, and when that tap is running. So we have a chance to experience water so viscerally, every day, all day. And I think that's really exciting about water because it's very personal to people. And in fact, drinking water quality is often the highest rated issue people care about in their daily lives for their personal health and safety for their family. So it's very, very personal for people. How do we get it? Most people turn on the tap and they get it from a drinking water utility. For about 60% of the people in the United States, 40% of us drink water from groundwater, maybe from a backyard well, for example. So all this water is recycled through the natural environment or through the built environment in some way. So every sip we're tasting was used before many times. Sometimes we think that we're drinking dinosaur pee, right? It's all the same stuff. So we have a chance to, it's the ultimate in the circular economy, water, because we continue to reuse it. And that's an important part of these 3 Ds as well, which is we want to know what's happening with water, which is why it's important to digitize water data. It's important to decentralize water and wastewater treatment because it's uneconomic for us to collect all that sewage water all the time and then treat it and then send it back out. Let's use it and recycle it where and when and how it's needed. And it's important to decarbonize water because about 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions comes from the human management of water or from aquatic ecosystems. So that's why we're focusing on the 3 Ds of water and how and when we use it.
So I think, look, that aspect of the 3 Ds makes perfect sense to me, Peter. Let's talk about the major players in that space, the hidden part of the water economy that maybe we don't think about as much, but is essential to how we get and consume water every day.
Sure. So, water is fundamental to every human endeavor, and our bodies are made up to 70% water, and about 3/4 of all the water used by humans on Earth is for agriculture, irrigating agriculture. So everything we do has water as an input. We can think about sort of the water industry, but I don't think that's the right frame of mind. I think it's really water as an input into everything else that we do. In fact, a recent study was shown from Global Water Intelligence that the value of water to the economy and to the water security is worth about $4 trillion today and is likely to triple in the next 10 years. So the intensity and the concern and risk of water in the operations of every industry is crucial. So when we think about how, yes, we drink a cup of water as we do here, but there's also water when we eat our food. So we often think about 1,000 gallons in a hamburger, for example, 1,000 gallons. Most of that goes to growing the plants that cows eat to grow, right? So in fact, the agriculture that is used to produce feed for cattle and cows occupies about 200 million acres in the United States alone, for example. Or when we prompt ChatGPT, that's uses about 1 liter of water for every prompt request from ChatGPT. So in everything we do, from chemicals to oil and gas to growing our food to the internet economy, water is fundamental to making that operational. So I like to see it as a sort of a cascading chain of value throughout every element of human endeavor.
Yeah, so it's an interesting framing there because we're not just talking about water delivery or how it's filtered or filtration, and I mean that's for human consumption or maybe for animal consumption in a way. But then, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. How it's processed to create energy at dams or at hydro plants, it's all part of kind of a fundamental cycle.
It's true. It's like, I think that your initial question relates to how many people think about water, which is the water and wastewater treatment industry, which is about $1 trillion per year globally.
Yeah.
There's a total addressable market. However, water as an input into all the other industries, right, is more, akin to many times that.
Yeah. Well, it's introduced as a data point. We talked about water being the number 1 most consumed resource. The number 2 most consumed resource is concrete, of which water is an input, right? So it's almost like the scale of it, I think, is sometimes hard to grok how much it falls into things. Let's talk about that a little bit. How much is the mismanagement of water costing us, and where are some of the hardest parts of the water as an input to decarbonize that you've seen over your career?
Sure. So when we think about the water cycle, it's what I think that's sort of the base of what your question is about. Water comes from the natural environment, the rivers, lakes, and snowfields and groundwater basins, and we extract water from the natural environment. The environment is actually providing a lot of ecosystem services, and we think about that as in modern economic parlance as the natural capital. There's value to what nature is doing for us. So we don't have to use the built environment to move heat and treat that water. which is massively expensive in money and in energy. So there is in the built environment, there is that whole cycle as well, which is expensive. But the natural capital, really, we want to protect and preserve and enhance that capability, which is where there's a lot of risk of us doing that as we decline, the biodiversity declines, as the natural environments decline in acreage throughout the world. There's a lot of risk there. But the atmospheres and the oceans and the ecosystems really are the core and provide trillions of dollars of value every year that we want to protect.
Yeah. What is something about water and the way we use it as an American economy that you think would surprise a lot of people to learn, given your experience?
I think what's surprising is that tap water is the cheapest at about 1 penny per gallon, compared to about 400 times that for a bottle of water.
Wow.
It's also the safest. And tap water is also the most regulated compared to bottled water, for example. So we are doing a disservice when we go out and buy a bottle of plastic water because it's convenient. We actually are safer and healthier and lighter on our wallets when we just turn on the tap and refill that reusable metal water bottle. A recent study shows that there are hundreds of thousands of individual pieces of nanoplastics in every bottled water. Every time water touches plastic, it's shedding nanoparticles into our water. When we touch manufactured plastic clothing, when we put food in a plastic Tupperware container, it's absorbing shedded plastic particles, and we're consuming that. And recent studies have shown that it's affecting our health. So people are more likely to have cardiovascular disease, strokes, and heart attacks when they have higher concentrations of plastics in their bodies, and even crosses the blood-brain barrier, the plastics do. So we also have made a lot of progress this week. The US EPA issued the final rules to manage and regulate PFAS, which is the chemical behind Teflon. And it's in our Gore-Tex clothing, it's in our Teflon pans, it's in firefighting foam, it's everywhere. It's in about 60% of the samples of drinking water, and we're going to have to be regulating that down to parts per trillion. It's an investment opportunity. Like my portfolio company, Clarity Water, is one of the leading PFAS destruction companies. And drinking water utilities will have to detect and treat to remove PFAS. So it's one other example of why tap water is and will be safer than bottled water, because it'll be more regulated.
Yeah, tell me more about Clarity Water. Where are they fitting into this problem of PFAS and PFAS promulgation in the water that we consume?
A lot of the sources of PFAS pollution come from when we throw away things that have PFAS in them. So if we throw away old pans or Gore-Tex clothing, they end up in landfills. And landfill leachate, or water that flows out of these landfills, are chock full of PFAS. And then that can contribute to pollution in groundwater. So we're looking to treat, or Clarity Water is looking to treat the sources of PFAS pollution, for example, these landfill leachate sources.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We looked very recently at a company doing something similar for phosphorus. So what we learned was because phosphorus intake is so important into plants, but it is a very inefficient process, what fertilizer manufacturers do is just put tons of it, 5 times as much. And let's say 20% is absorbed. The other 80% ends up in the runoff. And now, you've probably seen the images more than I have, but the green kind of color runoff into water is as a result of excess amount of phosphorus and fertilizer. And so we've seen companies that are trying to address that one specific problem, which you think, was that a niche market? And then you understand the scale of how much fertilizer goes into American agriculture today, and all of it is replete with phosphorus.
The over-application of fertilizers is a huge problem for a lot of the rivers and streams that are kind of the receiving water bodies from the, non-point source pollution from agricultural runoff. Gybe, GYBE.eco is one of the companies that is tracking and reporting on water pollution across entire river basins. So they work with the Nature Conservancy, for example, to track water pollution across the entire Mississippi River Basin and within the Klamath River Basin, where dams are being removed to support and restore salmon restoration and the tribal communities that rely on those salmon populations. So there's a chance for technology to be used to track and report and monitor and eventually restore or regenerate these rivers and streams.
Is there one barrier to decarbonization? You mentioned 10% of the carbon impact comes from human management of water, right? To paraphrase what you said there. If you could wave a magic wand, wave your hand, and there was one barrier to decarbonization that you could do away with, what would that be?
Currently, a hidden risk is methane. So methane can be up to 80 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas contributor than CO2. And it's been unregulated up till now. So aquatic ecosystems contribute about half of all global methane emissions, a lot of times from reservoirs and from wetlands. Open Hydro is a new portfolio company of Echo River Capital that is tracking and monitoring and reporting on emissions from aquatic ecosystems specifically. So it started by two women in Europe. They worked for the International Hydropower Association. They are experts in their field. They have the best models available to do this. And not only can they track and report or help companies to report on emissions, but they can help reoperate some of these aquatic ecosystems to reduce future emissions by up to half because of the reduce the creation and generation of methane from these systems. So I'm really excited about Open Hydro, and they have the potential to reduce emissions by up to 1 gigaton per year.
Wow.
Which is a significant contribution.
Yeah. Do you look at gigaton reduction or scale of reduction when you're making these investments? And, do you have a certain threshold at which you say, I need to see this level of reduction before this company? Or is it more like a directional, this should be better for the planet, but I don't have a number about it?
Just because a company operates in the water field doesn't make them an impact investment company. They have to be able to have a sort of a North Star of what they're trying to do and operationalize the measures of how they are tracking the impact. It could be reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, which is great, like Open Hydro. It could be to improve water efficiency or to de-water an industrial process, for example. Or it could be how much water can they treat or remove certain pollutants, like a Clarity Water with removing PFAS. So we're looking across these sort of three general areas of impact: water quantity, water quality, and climate mitigation or climate resilience.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. One of the things we were chatting about before we got on was the new interest in nature-based solutions. And I think we've seen a ton of money that has gone into decarbonization. We'll call it mechanical decarbonization, direct air capture, or even water-based carbon capture and reuse, what folks call CCS or CCUS. There is now more interest in nature-based solutions. As somebody who's been around water and obviously the downstream, water is an input in other categories, why do you think nature-based solutions have been slower to catch on when it comes to decarbonization?
A lot of nature-based solutions so far have been driven by government or nonprofits. Like I used to work for the Nature Conservancy, and a lot of the projects that they do are philanthropic in nature. Now there are more companies that are learning from nature or learning traditional ecological knowledge practices and incorporating them into for-profit startups. One of them that is a great example of this is CREO Carbon, which is using a natural process, enhanced rock weathering, to capture CO2 in wastewater treatment plants. So wastewater emits about 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and enhanced rock weathering, by introducing crushed limestone or olivine into the wastewater treatment plant process, can basically capture for eons the CO2 that otherwise would have been emitted to the atmosphere. So it's a great example of a startup company that's potentially very lucrative and impactful. That can be that's a new investment for Echo River.
Yeah. So on that topic, right? So speaking about putting olivine and I think we've seen that specific resource be used for anything from shoreline erosion to treating wastewater. What I'm seeing is, as a layperson in the industry, water, is the technical solutions have been proven out. They might have been proven out through nonprofits. Now, what's not needed is more maybe technological innovation, but actually more business model innovation. Is that kind of what you're seeing, or do you still feel like there is, technical risk when you are evaluating these companies at the earliest stages?
Companies obviously have technological risk, but Echo River doesn't take technology risk. Our sweet spot is tech that's validated and pre-commercial. So when we look at enhanced rock weathering, you're right, it is proven, and CREO Carbon has an opportunity to do something in a closed system. So their measurement, reporting, and verification is much more credible, because they can measure everything about that process, unlike a more open environment. So there are improvements in business models, and on this particular case, the expansion of the voluntary carbon credit market, right, is opening up new opportunities for companies that are looking to generate revenue from the sale of these credits into the voluntary market. So there's an opportunity there.
How important is the carbon credit market to your thesis as you're looking at these companies? How dependent are the companies you look at on the existence of thriving carbon markets?
So CREO Carbon, for example, does depend on the voluntary carbon market for future revenue. That's the only one out of the 20 investments that is reliant upon that particular market.
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to take regulatory or government policy risk. I think it's an element in the evaluation of the selecting of our investments. I don't usually invest in companies that are primarily reliant on regulation as a source for market expansion or revenue.
Yeah, certainly. How important is founders who come from an industry background when they are building in, let's say, water or water adjacent categories? Could an industry outsider succeed in building a business in this, and where have you seen that success happen?
I'm thrilled when industry experts and professionals come from other industries into the water and climate tech space. We need their skills, and we're trying every day to attract and retain experts from every field and endeavor into the space. We need it. We need their enthusiasm.
I always like to think of it this way. If I have a first-time founder with deep industry knowledge or a experienced founder coming from a different industry, given the choice between the two, Peter, which are you more likely to want to spend time with or want to invest in?
I'm looking for founders who have that growth mindset.
Yeah.
That's much more important. So, we can get people who are curious about water and climate. And what I'm interested in is hearing their story of when that idea came to them. What was that moment that flipped the switch for them when they said, I want to make a difference in water and climate? That's what I want to hear from them, because that is more important ultimately than I think what their experience level is in the space. If they are motivated and have a mission-driven internal engine that's going to get them fired up every day to make a difference, that's what I want to hear. I want to hear that passion, that enthusiasm, because this is a long road. And when they wake up every day, they need to, get started and make a difference.
Yeah, let's dig in on that, because I always find those first couple of founder conversations as you're leading up to an investment to be so interesting. What are some ways that you're able to identify that passion, that growth mindset, somebody who's, coming to it with obviously a passion for the industry, but also, that growth mindset for building a business in the category?
Being a founder means being challenged every day because they have to rise to the new challenge, both personally and professionally. One of the best ways or the best people that I've seen in that regard was someone on the show, Shane Dyer from Your Green.
Shane's wonderful.
Shane is a wonderful guy who was thoughtful. He had a lot of prepared responses to my questions. And when he wasn't sure, he got back to me after putting some thought into it. Those are the types of responses I'm looking for from people who show that they're listening, they're responsive, and they're going to do the work to rise to address the challenges that they are going to face every day.
Yeah. Is there a question or two that you like to ask every founder to better understand them, understand their ethos and how they lead as a founder or as a CEO?
When they ask me, I'm looking for what are the questions they ask me.
Okay.
Because that demonstrates curiosity. And sometimes when I'm responded with a question from my question, that is exciting for me. And one of the most curious people devoted to personal and professional growth I've met is one of the founders in the portfolio, Monsi Jain from Digital Pawnee. She is an incredible person who is so curious and always wants to know the reason behind my questions. And I think that is a really exciting type of relationship to have with people. It engenders more back and forth and learning for both of us.
You've mentioned the importance of grit and perseverance when you're evaluating a founder as somebody that you want to work with and back. What are some ways that you evaluate that? Or are there questions that you ask as you evaluate grit and perseverance in a founder?
Founders need to make progress each and every day. And one of the ways to accelerate that is through learning. So I'm really excited about hearing from founders how they're building learning into their operations. For example, are they doing A/B testing on their website? It's kind of a basic one, but it's showing that they are operationalizing learning for their team that will eventually lead into accelerating product development and accelerating a pace to financial results and impact.
Yeah, totally. Is there a founder that you met from your portfolio that you felt like from that conversation, you're like, wow, this is somebody who loves to learn, loves to iterate quickly, ask the right questions? Would love to hear a story from your portfolio of somebody who did that.
Sure. So Uravu Labs is an atmospheric water generating company in India. And I met them 2+ years ago when they were generating about 2 liters of water per day from their system. I've never seen a company learn as much as quickly as Uravu. Today, their machines are generating 2,000 liters per day, and they have solved so many technological challenges, many of them through trial and error or learning from others or building a huge team. So it's hard to imagine every time I get their monthly report, which is, at the peak, Uravu Labs generates a monthly video demonstrating their progress and what they've learned every single month. I love that discipline of reporting out to their stakeholders and investors through a polished video, and they have the resources and the commitment to learning and demonstrating what they've achieved. It's a really remarkable growth story.
Yeah, it's also a great, I think, lesson for founders that are listening, which is establishing that communication cadence with your investors. It's just one more way to build trust, right? And I think so much of this business at the stages that we invest in, it comes down to trusting the people, right? There's an idea, maybe there's a product, maybe there's a customer that's telling you they want it, but ultimately we are writing $50K up to $500K checks on the trust that this is the individual that can actually go and actuate this, make this real. And I tend to find the founders that establish good communication cadence, have a set number of things. The best ones, they have asks for all of their investors. And they say, this month, this is my, number one priority. How can you help me achieve it? you would be surprised how few investors or how few founders actually go out and make that a habit, make that, communication cadence a reality.
My expectation is that every portfolio company sends a monthly update. And they know that. And you're right, many of them still do not achieve that monthly cadence goal.
You've talked about a real passion that you have for tribal entrepreneurship. I'd love to understand a little bit more about that, whether it pertains to climate and water, and, what do more folks not know about tribal entrepreneurship and its importance in the ecosystem today?
It's pretty clear that our daily urban life is separated from nature. And I think that's a great missed opportunity for us to look to tribal, traditional, and indigenous peoples who figured out how to live in harmony with nature for thousands of years. And we can do more of that today when we are trying to reestablish and realign ourselves with how can humans persist on this earth. We're going to have to do that in a way that is more aligned with nature. And a great example of this is that the California State Park System now co-manages many of its parks with native tribal members. There are even some new venture funds that are partnering with tribal communities to invest in either tribally led companies or other efforts. So, for example, Raven is an indigenous led venture fund. Patagonia just announced that its new Home Planet Fund is going to prioritize indigenous projects. And I personally am looking to indigenous elders and wisdom keepers to inform the types of projects, technologies, and impacts that Echo River can have. I think we're going to have to look to them for support if we're going to get back on the right path to solve the climate crisis and to solve our biodiversity crisis.
Yeah, I think you're so right about that. And I think sometimes, you think about these forgotten communities, especially when it comes to water consumption. I was reading a story about the Colorado River, and last year, the water tables are gone, and folks are now looking to groundwater, or they're funneling the water that they are getting in those communities to golf courses. And 5 miles down the road are indigenous communities that have to ration. And it's this kind of conversation of like, who votes, and those who vote get to actually decide. And if these folks are not a part of the political conversation, then they don't get to be a part of the resource conversation. And I think it's a responsibility and imperative that I think we have as investors and we have as entrepreneurs also to like keep indigenous folks, keep tribal communities in mind, whether it's here in the U.S. or, speaking about Patagonia and in South America. These communities get forgotten too often. And yet I think you're so right, is that they have a lot of wisdom and knowledge about how they live that we'd certainly benefit from.
Millions of people in the United States do not have clean, reliable running water at home today, whether that's on tribal lands or whether it's in poor agricultural communities. We can do more. Just because they're not on central municipal water and sewage systems doesn't mean they shouldn't have clean, reliable access to water and sanitation. That's one of the reasons why I'm investing in decentralized technologies, is to create off-grid water recycling opportunities. Epic Clean Tech is an example of an on-site water recycling company based here in San Francisco. They put their technology in large buildings here in San Francisco, and it's useful for recycling any type of communal water and sewage system. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to sort of have leapfrog technology where communities won't have to be on an expensive, buried, centralized system to have clean, reliable water and sanitation.
Yeah, totally. I mean, so we've now hit all three, right? So we did digitize, talking about monitoring use and actually being able to provide reports on how it's being used. Decarbonize, and we've certainly talked about many examples there. And now we've hit on the third, which is decentralized, which I think is important given just how taxed our grid and infrastructure is. When I say grid, I mean from the energy side, but then infrastructure from utilization of our resources in this country not to mention around the world. It certainly now makes sense to me why all three Ds make sense in your portfolio. So let's chat about something fun. What did rafting in Class 5 rapids in Patagonia teach you about the role that we as humans play in the use and consumption of water?
Well, I love all water sports, sailing, swimming, surfing, and rafting included. So I was rafting down the Futaleufú River in Chile, which is a Class 5 river. Sometimes the rapids are so big that you have to carry your rafts around them.
Oh my goodness.
For safety's sake. But when you go into a rapid and you're seeing a sort of a gigantic standing wave, it's be able to paddle through that is called slaying the dragon. And so when you rise up for that challenge, you're at the front of the boat and you raise your paddle and to dig into this wave, you can approach it with fear, or you can approach it with curiosity. Like, what is going to happen here? It could be anything. One way or the other, you're going to get wet. So you're going to get wet by staying in the boat, or you might get thrown from the boat. And I think it's a great metaphor for life and for business, to approach challenges with curiosity and to find out what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The most we can do is put the effort in, whether it's putting your paddle into a gigantic wave or making that next call to a customer or to an investor. And I love that attitude. It provides a reason to be enthusiastic and make it fun and to bring your team along with you. So I really have that metaphor for rafting.
Yeah, I love that. And it, as you were speaking about that, it reminds me so much of one of my favorite hobbies, which is I'm a novice scuba diver. And as I've, gone to some beautiful and amazing places, the most important thing I think it's taught me is presence. Just one, being in that moment that you're in. There's not much else you can do. You can't talk to anybody. Yeah, you can hand signal, but ultimately it's breathing in, breathing out, and being kind of where you are. And as a new dad, as a fund manager, I try to remember that when I'm above water, because it's so easy to do when you're scuba diving, and then you've got these devices and things that pull you away from it. So as you were talking about kind of curiosity and fear, it was taking me to the idea of just finding presence in what you're doing and the opportunity to do that.
I couldn't agree more. Being present is one of the great gifts we can give other people too. To be present for them and to be engaged, be a good listener. I think that's a great point.
So to close on a couple of questions that I love to ask, what is a piece of advice you find yourself giving founders often, but feel like it doesn't get taken often enough?
Ultimately, startups are about people. So my advice and suggestion is for founders to spend a third to half of their time finding, cultivating, recruiting the best people they possibly can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is that an experience from your operating career where you feel like you could have done a better job with people?
When I talk to the alumni from WaterSmart Software, they often say that was the best experience of their professional career.
Okay. Because
the people were so great. We really spent a lot of time finding and cultivating those people and attracting. We had very, very low turnover. And they realized it was a magical experience. It was a team environment. There's nothing, right, that a small group of dedicated people can't achieve.
So you've been investing for a few years. You've obviously spent 30 years in water as a category, building companies in it. What is something you wish you knew before you became an investor?
What I've learned is that venture investing is a team sport. And I'm always excited now to meet and collaborate with new people, venture investors who can become advisors, co-investors, and partners. And nothing is more important to our portfolio companies than building a capital stack and a journey to allow them to grow and accelerate as quickly as they can, and we can help them to do that.
Yeah. That's a wonderful place for us to leave it. Venture is absolutely a team sport, and especially at the early stages where we invest, I like to say, it takes a village, and it's always about founders building their cap tables with people that want to be helpful to them, and investors like us being able to collaborate on the opportunities that will be the next category-defining companies. So, Peter Yolles, I just want to thank you so much for joining me on the show today and sharing your wisdom and experience with us.
Jay, I'm so excited to collaborate with you and see if we can even co-invest in a few companies together.
I would love that. Thank you. Well, that's it for this week's episode of Climb by VSC. Thank you so much for watching and listening. My thanks to my guest, Peter Yolles from Echo River Capital, for joining me on the show today. Hey, did you know that you can watch as well as listen to every episode of Climb? Join us on YouTube, where we put episodes out every Wednesday morning and clips that we put out every single day. You can scroll forever. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and iTunes. And if you love this episode, please recommend a guest to us. We'd love to have them on the show. Well, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching Climb by VSC. I'll see you next week.